Off the Wall Productions is proud to present Voices of the Methow. This is a series of conversations with interesting folk in and around the valley. So this is Byron, and I have my neighbor Donna Bajelis here with me. Thanks for being here, Donna.
It's a pleasure.
I was talking with a friend of yours the other day, and you came up in the conversation. He reminded me that you are a body worker and also have a school right here in the valley, not far from my house. I was a massage therapist at one point, and that sparked my curiosity, and so here we are. Can you give a little background on yourself and what it is you do and what you've got going here?
Sure. I'm trained as a physical therapist from the University of Connecticut, and during my physical therapy studies, I also studied pre-med. And then I took several jobs as a physical therapist, but I kept searching for something that I didn't even know existed. So I did some postgraduate studies in PNF, which is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, which is a neuromuscular technique for people that have had strokes and spinal cord injuries and muscular sclerosis and things like that. And then little by little, I took a orthopedic study interest group evening, and this gentleman was teaching some techniques that he learned from a Rolfer. He showed some pictures of people before and after Rolfing, and I realized that's what I thought physical therapy was.
Ah.
I want to change people's structure. And I realized that, oh my goodness, I have to start my training all over again. So over the course of time, I met a gentleman named Joseph Heller, and I found out about structural integration. Heller work is a form of structural integration, and presently there are 22 schools around the world teaching structural integration. So I did his training, and then after his training, I found out that he himself had studied with another woman named Judith Aston. And so then I trained with Judith Aston for the next 10 years. So the work that I do comes from physical therapy, and it comes from Joseph Heller, and it comes from Judith Aston.
Well, that's pretty cool to be able to study with the actual founder. There are
yes,
people who, yeah.
Totally fabulous.
Yeah.
Totally fabulous, yeah.
So you've got the School of Structural Medicine here.
Correct. That's what I chose to call the work I do. And the reason I called it medicine is because no one within the medical field, physicians, naturopaths, etc., actually work with what Ida Rolf called the organ of structure, which is the fascial system. So I called it structural medicine because a lot of the musculoskeletal pains, aches and pains that we have come from an organization of the connective tissue, or I should say a disorganization of the connective tissue.
Yeah.
And the way that we use our bodies in space. Yeah. So that's how I see, it's structural medicine because it's about changing people's structure, changing the way the head sits on top of the rest of the body, changing the way the legs are underneath the pelvis, changing the way the thorax is organized over the pelvis, changing the way the arms can swing and be free, or be more stable, in fact. So it can make you more stable, or it can make you freer, depending on what your needs are.
So if I'm getting this right then, so Ida Rolf started this off, Joseph Heller studied with her.
Correct.
And you studied with Joseph.
Correct.
And you're carrying it on in your own version or interpretation of or continuation of the work. Yeah.
Right, and I'm carrying it on with an intent to train my practitioners how to deal with people in pain.
Awesome.
How to deal with what really walks in your door. And most people will walk in because something hurts and they want it fixed. Now, sometimes the practitioner can just work with the area that hurts, and that's enough. But often, it's a movement dysfunction that the person is 100% unaware of that is causing that area to hurt. So, may I give an example?
Absolutely.
Right. So, the other day, I had a client fly in from San Francisco. And I work in Seattle and also in Twist, Washington. So she flew into Seattle, and she was having knee pain. So I examined her and found out that both of her hips barely literally barely move. So I've developed a form of something called myofascial length testing, which is part of our evaluation. So on the myofascial length testing, her hips were very rigid. So I explained to her that because her hips like to turn inward, that the knee is being the strained area. It's being the stress point of the entire system of her pelvis to leg. So I could call it unwinding. We did some myofascial release to unwind her hips, give her more range of motion, and the knee pain subsided. And that took a total of 6 hours. So we did 2 2-hour sessions and then another 2-hour session in the morning. So it's very exciting for me to be able to understand more of the source of the problem rather than just go to where it hurts. And that's what I want to teach my practitioners. I want to teach them to look at the entire body as a whole, the entire person's being as a whole. Sometimes the problems are mechanical, like for this lady, but sometimes the problems are emotional, like high anxiety levels. High anxiety will make you tense all over your body, and maybe particularly in certain areas like the belly, like your stomach. You'll have, tenseness in your belly all the time, problems digesting, things like that. And the anxiety or the sympathetic nervous system is what needs to be addressed. And that's an entire system in itself. But by working with the whole body, you can get people's anxiety levels down, teach them how to breathe. But the whole system needs to be let go, not just an area.
Not just an area. Not
just an area, but the whole person. So we work with the entire body as a whole, and we may center around certain areas that are painful, but sometimes we barely touch the painful area. We work where the restriction really is, and then that will change the painful area.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you have a way of evaluating a person's body to be able to know what to do, where to go to address their pain.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the system is called myofascial length testing. There's a little video about it on my website.
On your website, yeah. And what is your website?
Structuralmedicine.com.
Structuralmedicine.com. That sounds pretty easy.
Yeah. Structuralmedicine.com.
Well, Donna, I've got a background in bodywork myself. About 18 years ago, I had a massage practice for a couple years. And I also got involved with Milton Traeger's work, the Traeger bodywork. And I did some training in that, and I was really drawn to that because, and this is only my take on it, that there were no hard and fast rules, that you were, of course, taught to work with the client's body, but the heart of the work was to remain open and ask, for example, how can this be freer or looser? If you're working on somebody's leg or their arm or part of the body, you were asking yourself how, and that it was, and you were actually transmitting, in a sense, that feel to the person on the table, if this makes any sense. Do you find that similarities in your work?
Absolutely.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way that the practitioner uses their body will determine the capacity for the client to let go. So as we're working, we need to work at the layer and the speed at which the client's tissue can let go. Now, there are things that you can do to help coax that process, but the bottom line is you can't go any faster or any deeper than that person is willing to let go.
So you're paying attention.
Totally have to pay attention.
Yes.
Totally have to pay attention. And it has, sometimes it has to do with just the person's attitude about life and about letting people in, about their level of comfort with intimacy. Because having your body touched all over is a pretty intimate experience. And so people need to become more comfortable with being touched. Really.
Well, being.
And learning to be.
And that's
Yeah.
that's actually, I wanted to touch a little bit on that, because we were talking about that earlier, about that's part of your work or your training is just in being.
Right. So what I had mentioned was that during the training, the students and I have lots of what we call circles. And the circle is so that there is no hierarchy. And people in the, we as a group in the circle can bring up whatever's going on for us, that particular day or that particular month or whatever's going on. And the students and I listen. And we listen with our ears, but we listen with our whole being. And so we pay attention to the words that are coming out, but also the tone, the sincerity, and the energetics of what's being said. So we're paying attention to what's being said as much as we're paying attention to what's not being said, and the body language of the person. So the students learn to listen with their whole being, and then respond to the emotional state of the client and respond to the words of the client. Because sometimes the words and what's really being said don't match.
Right, yeah.
And it's really important to pay attention to all that. The students do have training in a form of dialogue that is called voice dialogue. And we have an instructor, Catherine Keir, who's an absolute world expert in voice dialogue, who comes here and teaches every few months.
Wow, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, she's miraculous. And she teaches internationally, a lot in Switzerland, and she has training programs in an area at Liberty Lake, I think, which is, I think, near Spokane. Maybe I'm not so great on Okanagan. But anyway, yeah, so we have teachers from all over come in and help with aspects of the training.
Well, right on.
Movement and dialogue, and I'm pretty good at those two as well, but I bring in experts whenever I can.
Well, that sounds good. Knowing who you are is step one. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Right, so I had said that the students, one of the aspects of the training is to help the students know who they are. Like, what is their primary way of operating in the world, and what are the parts of them that they tend to put off to the side. And what we try to do is integrate a person's whole being so that they can embrace aspects of themselves that they only see in other people. So, students pay attention to who they admire and look up to, who their heroes are, and we teach them to embrace those aspects of other people. We teach them to embrace that into themselves and to bring that forth. And on the opposite side, we also pay attention to who they dislike, who they have issues with, and to look at what aspects of that person that they are looking at that they don't like, and to embrace that aspect into themselves too. So that you integrate both the dark and the light, and the good and the bad, and you realize it's all of us. We're all of it, depending on our circumstances. So I've had my dear secretary, who's been with me over 20 years. In the old days, she would say, "I don't like that person." I'd have a new client come in, and "I don't like that person," and I would say to her, "Give me 2 years, and they'll be your best friend." Because people that are in pain, it's very difficult if you're in a lot of pain, it's very difficult to be nice. You don't feel like being nice. And things irritate you because you're at a high level of irritation all the time. So having been in pain myself has been one of my best teaching tools, because getting over an issue of constant pain it's been eye-opening for me to realize how it changes people's personalities and the way they approach their lives. And I always tell my students, giving people hope is your first step. The first session is about giving people hope.
That's profound what you just said. And also what I'm thinking about is teaching integration with the students into being able to integrate themselves. They'll be able to help people in a way more fully, where they can embrace the darkness within themselves as well as...
Yeah. It's really, that's what I love about voice dialogue as a teaching module or tool, is that we have the light in the dark, and we have, if I'm pointing a finger at someone and saying, I don't like that about them, then I'm pointing 2 fingers back at myself.
Right.
It's really something I don't like in myself that I'm not willing to integrate into my being, to look at, like, I admire kindness in people. Like, I highly admire kindness in people, but at the same time, I've had to look at the parts of me that are unkind. It's like the parts of me that are intolerant, just in order to also be able to embrace my kindness. So it goes both ways. It goes both ways. And, I can tell you truthfully, there are moments when I've been asked the same question by my students 5 times in the course of, 10 minutes, and realized that those other 4 times that I answered the question, no one was listening. Or it just went in at a, 1/8 of a level or whatever. And I have to answer the question again. And I have to take a breath and take my intolerance down a notch or 2, and then answer the question for the 5th time. So there are moments that I don't necessarily feel kind, but I learned to embrace that and say, okay, well, you've been asked 5 times, you have, it's like blah, blah, blah. So I'll just answer the question again. Yeah.
Well, isn't that part of the work, actually, to be able to be when you're not feeling kind, perhaps, and when you can still have a like a quarter second where you can have the choice. At least you have a choice. You have a choice. Yeah. And sometimes we'll make a mistake, and then we just sweep it up and go forth again. Go forth again. Yeah. Clean it up and go forth again. Well, let me ask you this: you're talking about the myofascial system and whatnot. Do you think that there's a correlation between emotion and muscle tissue? Emotion and the fascial tissue. And fascial. Thanks for correcting me. Yeah, so the fascial tissue. Right. So a long time ago, Ida Rolf used to say she would see women for the Rolfing series, and then the women would send their boyfriends or their husbands for the Rolfing series. And then the wives would hear back from their friends, your husband has been so nice lately. Like, his personality's changed. I actually had a student of mine in Hawaii. I had dinner with he and his wife a couple years ago, and he trained with me over 10 years ago. And she said to me at dinner, she goes, "You've changed his life. He used to be a tough guy, and now he's a really nice guy." And I'm like, how did I do that? Well, the training did it. I didn't do it. Something about, if you have an intention of a transformational experience within the training, a transformational experience occurs. Yeah. And I notice the differences even in my students presently, who are about 1.5 years into the program. They've already made some big changes. Yeah. So it's always a surprise, and yet it's my intention. My intention is they're not the same as when they walked in the door. Something changes profoundly so that they can really be with people in a meaningful way, and in a good, intimate way. Yeah, connected. I think as a world, we're desperate for connection. We have the internet. We're connected that way. But in terms of actually touching a person and being with them, and not just talking chit-chat or about the ball game, but being able to have a true conversation, it's not that easy. Well put. Yeah, I think back before there was cell phones, and it wasn't that long ago.
No.
And whatnot. Besides, then there was TV, and different things. As you roll back through the recent history, we were much more connected on a daily basis. People were singing, for example, in their homes. They had pianos.
That's right.
Yeah.
Or on the front porch.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things I love about TWISP is that you may live 20 acres away from someone, but it's always the feeling that you could go knock on their door and be welcomed in. There's always that feeling in this valley, and it's something that I adore.
Well, and that reminds me, you were saying that although you have your school set up here, School of Structural Medicine, you actually have an office in Seattle as well.
Yeah, it's actually on Mercer Island.
Mercer Island, yeah. Mm-hmm. And so you still see clients over there.
Mm-hmm. And I see clients here as well.
And here as well. Well, imagine that. Yeah. But what I was thinking about was, you had mentioned, we were talking beforehand, and you were saying that you like having the school here in this environment because the students, this is a more perhaps relaxed place for the students to learn. Why don't you speak to that a little bit?
So one of the reasons I brought the training to TWISP Washington is that it's in the country, and especially for the city dweller students, they don't even realize it, but their nervous system is amped up in order to live in a city. The driving is much faster. You have to be hyper aware, and so your autonomic nervous system has the parasympathetic and the sympathetic, and the sympathetic is fight, flight, or freeze. So living in a city, there's much more of a sense of that fight or flight, and here in TWISP, we're more in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is digestion, breathing, contentment, easygoing. It's just more of that energetic here. And I can tell you so I bring my students here so that they can experience the energy of this place. It's, there's spaciousness. The property has a 360-degree view. I'm on the river. They can go down and skinny dip in the river if they want, So it's easygoing, and they can take a hike at lunchtime. We have 2-hour lunches, and enjoy the area. Yeah, and it settles them down so they can simply learn and not have to keep addressing all the issues that come up at home in the city. So, and not all my students are from the city. I've had students from Virginia and students from Canada, and students from Indiana, all over the place. So New York City, et cetera, et cetera. So it all depends. But there's a comfort here. I find it a little special vortex of energy. That is the Methow Valley.
Well put.
It's a small valley, but it's very, very special.
Yes, it is. So Donna, how do your trainings work? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Of course. So I have a 4-year training program, and usually I will set up another training program of 4 years somewhere into the 3rd year of the present training program. Mm-hmm. So we're probably due to start another program in 2019.
So in about next year?
Next year.
Yeah.
I'll put it on my website.
You put it on your website. How many students do you accept?
All right, so I accept a maximum of 14 students.
Yeah.
And the present training has 6. The training before that had 10. And anywhere from 8 to 6 to 14 people at a time. I'm 100% committed to them to finish the training.
So Dawn, it sounds like you've got pretty small groups, and so you can have a pretty good attention to detail, and that's pretty wise, it sounds like. I'm very interested in each student developing to their maximum. I'm very interested in them having a
lucrative and full practice as much as they want for their situation. And I've set up the program so that they are practicing the work on models, on people that they bring into their work. So they have, from day one, from the first weekend, they are required to practice whatever we learned on 5 people minimum. And those 5 people should be committed to working with them for 2 years so that they go through the entire series. So the first 2 years are the series of structural integration. And then the next 2 years are how to augment and modify that series to adapt to issues with pain.
Adapt to issues with pain, because that's basically the bottom line.
The bottom line is help people get out of pain.
Get out of pain.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great goal.
And sometimes that will require just a few sessions, and sometimes it will require quite a few. It depends on how old the person is, how much their pattern of movement is ingrained into their being, and it has so many aspects. And sometimes you can make a difference enough to help a person, say 50%, so that they can go on with their work. And then they can come back once a month or once every 3 weeks to keep getting better. So get people back to their functioning. Yeah, and then you can offer them much more over an extended period of time. That's what I have to do with a lot of my clients. People have to work for a living. And my job is to get them back to work if that's what they want, so that they can function and get through the day and then make a paycheck. And then over time, over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, we can work to improve their function and make sure that they stay out of pain. Yeah. Get out of pain and stay out of pain. Yeah.
That sounds like a real worthy endeavor there. Yeah, I could speak to that myself, actually. Yeah.
Do you know that 94% of people in the United States experience back pain enough to stay out of work?
Wow, 94%, huh?
Yes, yeah. In the United States.
Well,
we have a structural problem.
Well, maybe, yeah. That's actually how I ended up in massage school, was a back injury. I was a agricultural diesel mechanic, and I ended up not being able to do that. So, but I also needed to heal mentally as well as physically, yes. And so that's when I ended up in massage school, for example. And so there's some similarities that I've experienced in my life with what you're talking about, and that's pretty cool. So Donna, your school is certified by the state of Washington, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So and so why would I want to come to a 4-year school when I can get certified like in a year in Washington?
Right. So structural integration, there are 22 schools internationally that teach structural integration. All of them are 1 year approximately in length. And all of them teach a recipe, a structural integration series. So that's as far as the training will take you. So my intention for my 4-year program is to take my students far beyond the recipe.
Right.
To a place where they can actually evaluate and customize their treatment to the client's needs, their goals, and what they want to accomplish. So if you're going to treat pain and the person is 65 years old, it's going to take a little longer or a little more customization rather than just a series. So if you're coming in with, let's say, low back or hip pain, the treatment in the instructional integration may be 2 sessions on that area or anywhere near that area, and then you move on. But in structural medicine, we can customize the treatment so that there's enough change in the area of pain that will allow the person to then be integrated through their whole system. Mm-hmm. So it may take 15 sessions or it may take 20 sessions and to get that person pain-free. And it may take 3. they don't have to go through a whole series in order to necessarily change their pain.
So we're talking about pain relief.
Pain relief, and we're talking about integrating the way we work through the whole body.
Right. Now, I can see that like a 4-year program, you would come out...
You have to learn how to think. The honest to God truth is, you have to learn. I teach my students how to think.
There you go.
I don't teach them a recipe, although they know the recipe after the first year. But I teach them how to think. And that takes time.
That does take time.
That takes time, yeah. They're learning a system called myofascial length testing. So they're learning how to see a person's structure, and they have to integrate all of that into a customized treatment plan. And that takes thinking. And I see sometimes the reluctance to think. Because it takes time. It's like if you have to sit down and like figure things out, you know? So, but it pays off in the long run.
So it's a part of being as well as, you know, what we were talking about. And thinking and being, Well, you know, that's interesting because I was trained as a massage therapist in California. I believe it was 100 hours. And actually when I came out of that, I can't say as I was adequately trained necessarily, but I could start learning, you know, on people. You know what I mean? And that's basically, in a lot of ways, in different trainings I've done throughout my in different careers I've had, that seems to be the kind of the standard thing, is that basically you're taught just enough to get in your field and then you start learning. So you're saying that in the 4 years you come out...
Most of my students come out with a full practice. A
full practice, there you go. Yeah. So you work into that practice.
So you work into the practice.
Yeah. Well, that's well.
Yeah, and after the first 2 years in training, they can sit for their massage board.
Okay, after 2 years, and then
because they have enough hours to sit for their massage board.
Right.
And then the last 2 years of the training, they're actually practicing as they're learning. So.
Well, yeah, of course. Well, that's great. Well, Donna, this has been really fascinating talking to you. So is there anything that we've missed or that you'd like to cover before we wrap up for today?
Well, I just welcome everyone to go to my website, which is structuralmedicine.com. Check out the school, and if you'd all like to have a session, certainly call me. My number's there on my website.
Well, that sounds like a plan. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So this is Byron and
Donna
saying
so long for now and keep it on the route.
You've been listening to Voices of the Methow, an off-the-wall production. Until next time, thanks for listening.